It was Sunday, December 7th, 1941. The sun was rising over the Hawaiian Islands, and the naval base at Pearl Harbor was draped in peace. American sailors were on their ships, some still asleep, others sipping coffee. Some were playing cards, while others sat down to write letters home. No one imagined that within 2 hours, this quiet harbor would become the site of one of the greatest massacres in U.S. military history. What happened that morning wasn't just a military strike. It was a shock that jolted an entire nation from its slumber. And to this day, historians and military strategists grapple with a question that remains unanswered. Did the U.S. government know what was coming? Could the attack have been prevented? Or was it allowed to happen, to force America's hand into the war? In this documentary, we go behind the scenes of the attack on Pearl Harbor. We'll analyze the Japanese strategy, the American blunders, and the controversy that still divides public opinion. Prepare yourself for a journey into the past, where the fate of millions was decided in a matter of hours. While Americans slept in peace, a Japanese task force moved silently across the Pacific. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, one of Japan's most brilliant military minds, had a bold plan: destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet in one surprise strike before America could ever react. Yamamoto knew the Americans well. He had studied in the United States and understood that it was an industrial titan. He knew that if the war dragged on for months or years, America would win. That's why he planned a quick, decisive blow, an attack that would humiliate the Americans and force them to the negotiating table. The plan was complex. Over 350 aircraft, including Zeros and bombers, were staged on 6 Japanese carriers. They launched in the pre-dawn darkness, flying low over the ocean to avoid American radar. It was an operation of surgical precision. Every pilot knew exactly what to do. Every bomb had a specific target. The Japanese didn't just want to sink ships. They wanted to crush the American spirit. At 7:48 a.m., the silence of Pearl Harbor was shattered by the roar of engines. The first Japanese bomber dove over the harbor, and for a moment, the Americans were frozen in disbelief. Someone screamed, "This isn't a drill! It's the real thing!" In a matter of minutes, the sky was choked with planes. The harbor turned into an inferno. The USS Arizona took a direct hit. A bomb pierced her armored deck and ignited the ammunition magazine. The blast was so violent, the ship was torn in half, sinking in less than 10 minutes and taking over 1,100 sailors to the bottom of the sea. The USS Oklahoma was struck by multiple torpedoes and capsized, trapping hundreds of men inside the hull. Other ships, like the USS West Virginia and the USS California, were left gutted. American planes, parked on nearby airfields, were incinerated on the ground before they could even taxi. It was a massacre. The Japanese owned the sky, but the Americans weren't defenseless. Some sailors managed to grab their weapons and fire back at the enemy aircraft. Others fought to save their wounded, while bombs rained down around them. It was a moment of sheer heroism amidst the despair. The attack lasted about 2 hours. When the last Japanese planes turned away, the harbor was in flames. Over 2,400 Americans were dead. Nearly 1,200 were wounded, and the U.S. Pacific Fleet was effectively destroyed. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, it's where it gets even more intriguing. Many historians and military analysts argue that the U.S. government knew an attack was imminent. Intelligence reports had intercepted Japanese messages. They had broken parts of the Japanese diplomatic code. They knew Tokyo was planning something massive. But before we dive into the attack itself, we have to answer one crucial question. Why did Japan attack Pearl Harbor? It wasn't a random act of aggression. It was a desperate gamble. In 1941, the United States cut off oil exports to Japan, threatening to paralyze their military machine. For a nation that imported nearly 80% of its oil from America, this was a death sentence. Japan needed resources to continue its war in China and expand across Southeast Asia. They needed oil, rubber, and tin. and the only way to get them was to remove the one obstacle standing in their path: the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto designed a strike that would cripple America at sea, hoping it would force them to the negotiating table. But he knew it was a risk. He once confessed to his colleagues, "I can run wild for 6 months. After that, I have no expectation of victory." He was right, but what he didn't expect was that Pearl Harbor would awaken a sleeping giant. And that giant would never forgive, and when the smoke finally cleared, the numbers told a devastating story. For the United States, the cost was staggering. Over 2,400 American servicemen were dead. More than 1,100 of them were from the USS Arizona alone. Nearly 1,200 more were wounded. The Japanese had sunk or destroyed 4 American battleships. 4 more were heavily damaged. The fleet was crippled. In the air, the losses were just as severe. Nearly 200 American aircraft were destroyed on the ground, and another 159 were damaged beyond repair. But the Japanese also paid a price. They lost 29 aircraft, and 64 of their pilots and crew never returned home. 1 Japanese sailor was captured, the first prisoner of war of the Pacific conflict. Yet, despite the devastation, there was a crucial detail that would change everything. The American aircraft carriers were not in the harbor that day. They were at sea, and those carriers would soon become the spearhead of America's revenge. So why was no action taken? Why were the ships anchored together, making them easy targets? Why were the planes lined up wing to wing on the tarmac? Some theories suggest that President Franklin D. Roosevelt knew the attack was coming but let it happen. Why? Because he knew the American people didn't want to go to war. The public was staunchly opposed to getting involved in Europe or the Pacific. But after Pearl Harbor, the entire nation rallied. War became inevitable, and the United States entered World War II with everything it had. It remains a controversial theory. Many historians reject it, arguing there is no concrete proof. Others claim that the key documents are still classified, and the truth may never fully come to light. What do you believe? Was it a tragic intelligence failure, or a calculated strategy to drag the United States into the war? That question remains open to this day. The day after the attack, President Roosevelt delivered a speech that would become etched in history. He declared, "A date which will live in infamy." The United States declared war on Japan. Days later, Nazi Germany declared war on the U.S. World War II had become